What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another 60 feet 6 inches, your fantasy baseball home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You could follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. Once again with me, and no, you are not seeing double. I know we did not plan this, but we're both wearing our fake pigskin hats. We're wearing very similar shirts. But it's Ben Rolfe. What's up, Ben?
Not much. Mine's a cricket shirt, so I can be fairly confident you
Hmm,
don't have the same one
I
because
do
you
not.
you,
I do not.
you barely know what cricket is. The only way you know what it is that you can occasionally gamble on it, and therefore you may have considered it at some point in your life. Uh, it's been a lovely day here today. We have reached double figures in the temperature for the first time in months, and it's
Ugh,
been amazing. We went for a
sounds
walk with the
miserable.
little one. It's been lovely. I've cut the grass. I've had a wonderful day. The only problem is it's going to be lovely now for the next 2 weeks when I'm not playing cricket, and then when I'm playing cricket in 2 weeks' time, it's going to piss it down.
Out here on the West Coast, it's a lovely 75. It's sunny. It feels like summer will be here before we're ready for it. But I can't wait. Enjoying this weather and enjoying baseball. And there's a lot to get into today. Obviously, we'll hit some waiver wire. We'll talk some injuries, all that good stuff. But Ben, let's get into some big news items and let's talk about Mr. Gerrit Cole. We talked about him last week, and we were like, "Well, is this guy for real? What should we do? All that good stuff." And he comes back. Granted, as you mentioned, it was against the Rangers. The Rangers aren't exactly a strikeout avoiding team, but he had 14 strikeouts. He's got 25 against Texas in two starts. He's got 36 on the season. Um, is Gerrit Cole like finally living up to kind of the hype we all wanted him to find in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it looks like he's finally getting it right, and I'm just having a look now. He's got 17.5% swinging strike rate this year. His highest previously was 10.2. So you have to think that there's a chance that's going to come down. But looking at the other numbers, there's nothing majorly standing out other than he's getting a lot of swings outside the zone and getting a lot less contact outside the zone. So whether or not the ball is moving more is what I would be interested to see. I'm just trying to find what his pitch mix is this year, and so last year he threw the fastball 42% of the time, and this year he's doing it nearly 50% of the time. The I think that's his slider. No, that's his changeup. He's using slightly less. His slider. He's gone back to what he was doing in 2015, and he's pretty much got rid of his sinker at this point. So it's an interesting mix that he's all of a sudden gone back to. I believe 2015 was his last really good year. So 2015 was the really good year where the ERA and the K per nine came in, and he's gone back to a very similar pitch mix to what he had that year with the change up and the slider coming in more. So it'll be interesting to see whether that's a concerted effort by the team, and if it is, he's a guy that you might even find if you traded for him now, you actually paid. You could end up buying low if he carries on doing this because there's no reason the numbers will come back down to earth. He's not striking out 15.4 guys per 9 innings. It's not going to happen. But there's every reason that he could be well over like 10, maybe even into the 11. He's got the ability to do it if he gets the stuff right. And he plays against some awful teams in that division. So there will be tough games like when he runs into the Angels. But if he keeps running into the Texas Rangers offense, he could strike out 300 or 400 on the season if he plays them enough because they're just awful. He's had
Yeah.
25 strikeouts in two starts, and but then again he had 11 in his other outing, and that wasn't against Texas. So that was I want to say Baltimore, but I'm not 100% sure. He's um. He's been very good this year, and I'm really pleased I've drafted him in many places. He is making up for many of the other deficiencies that my fantasy teams have.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, being able to play Texas is great. Being able to play Oakland will give him opportunities. The other matchup was against San Diego. But
Ah,
that was a home game, and Houston isn't exactly like crazy favorable park. So it's not bizarre that he's racking up um, the strikeouts, but the fact that he's only allowed two earned or three earned all season. He's limiting the walks. The strikeouts are obviously awesome. Like he's just been really really strong, and I'm very excited about him. And I think he could be a guy that makes some serious noise and helps them help people win leagues. Another guy that's doing that is Mr. Hanley Ramirez. This is a guy that got no love. We all thought, oh, this is a platoon with him and Mitch Moreland. Maybe even he's on the wrong side of it. The guy is just absolutely crushing. Coming into today, which is Saturday, had 357, 2 homers, 3 RBIs, 8 runs, 12 or wait, no, that doesn't make sense. 3 steals, 12 RBI. He also hit another bomb today, crushed one off the wall, so he's racking up the numbers. This is a guy obviously showing the form that he had a couple years ago where he was really good, and now he's running, and now he actually wants to run. I mean, is it crazy to think that he could hit 30 home runs, 25, 30 home runs, and I don't know, 10, 12 steals?
I mean, if he's intent on stealing 20 bases, we saw Manny Machado say a couple of years ago, "I'm going to steal 20 bases and go out and do it." Then there's no reason why we couldn't be
I
looking
mean,
at a
freaking
2020 guy if
Lance
he
Berkman
can
did
stay
it
healthy.
one year and took advantage of that. So yeah, you're right. It's all about want to.
And it's about whether he can stay healthy. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
hasn't stole 20 bases now since he was with the Marlins in 2011. So you'd bet against it. But we've seen these sort of peaks and troughs from him in his career. Just looking back over the numbers, with the Dodgers in 2013, he hit 345, 20 home runs and 10 steals. 2014, that dipped to 249 with just 13 home runs and 14 steals. And then he went all the way down to 249, picked it back up his second year with the Red Sox, went down again in his third year. So he is a bit of a guy like this. Frustrates the hell out of me because I seem to own him in the years he sucks and don't buy in the years he's good. But I mean, it's early. But if he is out there on your waiver wire, it's rare at this point. I believe he's somewhere in the 70% owned kind of
Yeah,
range. You should go and get him just because. If this carries on, there's going to be two aspects. One, he's going to be a great trade chip, and two, he's going to put some great numbers on your team. And if he starts to go cold, you can just drop him.
let's talk about Hanley though. Assuming okay, so let's most leagues he's going to be owned, at least the ones that I'm sure our listeners are in. If he's still floating around, obviously yes, must add. Question: if he is on another team and you can get him, and the owner thinks they're quote unquote selling high, but you think you're actually paying a fair price or maybe even a little bit less, is he a guy you consider trading for, or do you think he's starting to put up a lot of numbers now and he could tail off, or a big injury could really derail it, and then all of a sudden you're really frustrated with owning him?
I'm always going to be hesitant to pay for a guy at what appears to be his peak of his value, and I don't see it getting better than it's getting now. I mean, if he does what he's doing for the next couple of months, his value is going to be higher, but it's not going to get significantly higher. So I would struggle to trade anything of significant value for him. Like I'm not doing anything crazy like going out and giving up somebody like Anthony Rizzo who
Mm-hmm.
struggled to start the season and been on the DL. I'm not going to go and do anything crazy like that. But if I can get what I perceive to be accurate price for him, I mean, if I can get something in sort of let's say top 12, top 15 first baseman, 100%. If I could give that up, I would do that for him now. I think that feels safe for a guy that's going to play every day for the Red Sox and is showing this at the start of the season. There's been a lot of disappointments in that 12 through 20 so far this year, and if I could give up one of those guys that somebody else believes in, let's say someone in your league's a huge Yankees fan and thinks that Greg Bird's going to come back and rake, then absolutely you're doing that kind of deal, aren't you? It's just finding the right balance, and I do the deal, and often the deal that will work will be Hanley plus something for something and something. It'll be like a two for two rather than a straight swap, because I think you'll struggle to find an owner willing to just swap you straight out, but you might get lucky, and I'd do the deal. I think that it's a worthwhile one. Just don't do anything crazy like give up Joey Votto and Anthony Rizzo. Then you might regret what you've done.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you could still get 25 home runs and
Mm?
10 plus steals the rest of the way, hitting close to 300. That's a player I definitely want. Um, I want to talk about, before we get into the injuries and the waiver wire and all that stuff, a trade that went down in our Fake Pigskin Points League, Ben. And I don't know if you saw it this morning. but I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to kind of get your 2 cents. So, what we had a Nolan Arenado and Chris Davis from the A's for Jacob DeGrom and Corey Seager. Now you're more of a points league guy than I. So when you hear this trade, what's your initial reaction?
So perhaps my initial reaction is that, well, obviously Nolan Arenado is the best player in that deal,
Yep.
and then Corey Seager is definitely second, and then depending
Is
on
he?
need, I would say Corey Seager is second, with Chris Davis and Jacob DeGrom kind of interchangeable.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
in this format. If it was a roto league, I think I would start to lean towards giving Chris Davis and Jacob DeGrom more value. But it all depends. I'd have to have a look at what those teams need. Let's say, for example, I'm not sure if the team giving up Corey Seager or the team trading for Corey Seager, have they just lost Elvis Andrus? Would be my first thought. Do they have an excess at third base? Um, and it really comes down to how you feel your outfield is compared to your starting pitching. They're both quite deep positions relative to others in terms of the amount of people you have to start. So if you feel like you've got an excess of outfielders and you want to flip Chris Davis for Jacob DeGrom, I don't hate it.
So you're not buying into Degrom so far. You're not. I mean, I think the way he pitches, the strikeouts he's tallying, like I think this is a guy that could challenge to be back near the top 10, top five at the position.
I've spent enough time talking to Damian Dombrowski to know that you never trust the Mets and their ability to be completely incompetent with their management of players. So I'm always hesitant trading for pitching, but I think Corey is the best guy in that. I would argue that what's happened here is you've traded in the deal players 1 and 4 for 2 and 3, which to me works perfectly well. And if you're willing to gamble on Jacob DeGrom at age 30, finding it again and getting it all back, then by all means, that's not a bad deal. I mean, he wasn't horrific last year. He pitched 201 innings with 10.7 strikeouts per nine and an ERA of 3.5.
Hmm.
I mean, that if that's his floor, I'm quite happy with it. If that's his floor, he's definitely closer to Chris Davis than he is to Corey Seager in the deal. But you're right. If he's the guy even in 2016, who had a 3.04 ERA and 8.7 strikeouts per nine, then he is starting to get closer to Corey Seager. So it's definitely a 1 and 4 for 2 and 3 type deal. And I didn't think anything of it. I looked at it and thought, it's a fairly even deal.
Yeah, I'm with you. Arenado's definitely the best player, but I'm a little. I think Degrom's the second, and I think in a fantasy baseball, especially in that league where you have a starts minimum, I like being able to lock in Degrom every week. I think he will be 220 strikeouts. I think he'll have an ERA close to 3, and I think he'll be around 200 innings. And I think that's a guy I definitely want. Arenado's a big price tag to pay, but I also, getting Degrom and Seager, I think is a nice deal, and I definitely thought it was definitely interesting, and yeah, I can see from both sides. I still love getting Nolan Arenado, who I think it's a little buy low, but Degrom is definitely a nice pickup. All right, Ben. The sound you hear is the alarm of the ambulance. We got to go through some injuries. And we'll start with the guy you wrote up, Elvis Andrus. Fractured elbow. He's out 6 to 8 weeks. Awful news. This is a guy that's never been on the DL, so it's definitely very interesting. Took a pitch right to that elbow. I guess if you own Andrus and you're in a league with a couple DL spots, is he a guy that you're trying to prioritize on the DL, or out maybe 2 months? Is he a guy that you're willing to cut and work the waiver wire?
I mean, honestly, if you've lost two better players from your team than Elvis Andrus, you should probably give up on the season now because, like, if you've lost two better players and Elvis Andrus, you've probably lost three of your first 6 picks.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, you might as well go and find a different league and see if you can start a league a couple of weeks late because that's going to hurt. He's definitely a guy I'm prioritising. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? In the preseason, I wouldn't have said I dismissed Elvis Andrus, but I kind of just went, Yeah, he's not a top five shortstop. And all of a sudden, I started looking at him when he's injured and thinking, well, where he hits in the Rangers lineup, he can contribute runs, he can
Hmm.
contribute RBIs. He's already started hitting home runs this year. You know the stolen bases are likely to be there, and he can hit for 300 average. I mean, suddenly Elvis Andrus is a five category contributor for a fantasy team, and I've never thought about it that way. And actually, I think going into the season, if Elvis Andrus' power was real, I think that was the question mark we all had, was that yeah, the 20 steals were nice, but he's not a big steal. He's not a big base stealer. He's not like your Billy Hamilton type kind of guy in terms of the guy that can give you 50, 60 steals. But if the power's real, I mean, how much worse is he than say than what a Charlie Blackmon does, considering the position? And that's what I've kind of come around to. So 100%, I'm keeping hold of Andrews, and I'm actually starting to put some offers in for Elvis Andrus and just seeing if I can take advantage of some other people's misery.
Well, that's another thing I was going to ask, and we'll get into some waiver wire names. But if you have Tim Anderson, if you have Dansby Swanson, and the owner is willing to take one of those guys for for Elvis Andrus, is that a move you're comfortable making, knowing that you can pick up somebody else, fill in that 2 months, and then hopefully over the last 3 to 4 months you get a guy who can hit you 10 home runs and steal maybe 15, 20 bases?
Yeah, it depends who you can pick up. Obviously, if you're really scraping the barrel, I think you're gonna have to just stick with Swanson and Anderson. But what's to say that Swanson's going to keep doing what he's doing? I like Swanson, but I'm not 100% confident he's going to keep going. If you're set with steals, say for example you drafted Anderson thinking maybe he'd give you 20 steals, and now you're looking at it thinking Anderson could be a 40 steal guy, and I've got enough steals. I think I'm going to win stolen bases anyway. I don't need Anderson steals. Then, by all means, I'd give up Anderson because I think he's going to be a real peaks and troughs kind of guy. I think what you can find on the waiver wire in some weeks will be better than Tim Anderson, but they probably won't give you the stolen bases that he'll give you.
Hmm.
I mean, I picked up Aledmus Diaz off the waiver wire in our fantasy league, our keeper league, and my team is dreadful in that. It's had more injuries than the rest of the major leagues combined. It feels like, um, and so I picked up Aledmus Diaz, and I mean, if you can get that kind of guy, and home runs is what you need, and you're willing to sacrifice a bit of average, by all means, do the deal. Fill in with guys like Diaz, and replace, bring Andrews back when he's off the DL.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's crazy. So Andres is definitely a guy we'll be holding on to. There's a multitude of middle infield injuries, so we'll go through them all, and then we'll give you some possible replacements. His teammate Rougned Odor is dealing with a hamstring injury. It looks like he'll be fine to come off the DL when his 10 days is up, which is looking like next weekend. I guess I know you're not the biggest Odor fan. Is he a guy you're looking to replace even when he comes back?
Yeah, I'm not sure how confident I feel. I'm really sorry about that. That's my cat getting involved in the podcast. I'm going to
Uh,
throw something at her. That's my cat coming out of her litter tray and getting involved on the podcast. So I apologise for the
well,
sound
we
like
always
some.
we always need some guests, so that's fine.
Yeah, and she talks the most sense of anyone on this thing. So, um, yeah, Rougned Odor, to mind the pun, but he's really stunk it up so far this year. Like, I mean, he's hitting 206. He's yet to hit a home run. He's yet to steal a base. I'm really concerned as an Odor fan. I think he will get to 25 home runs. I think he will get you 10 steals, but it's going to be messy waiting for it. And I don't like messy.
Yeah.
It's kind of and hamstring injury is one of these nagging things that I feel like Texas, just because the situation they're in with Elvis Andrus now gone and being as bad as they are, might rush Odor back. And you could also see the situation where if he does get worse, they shut him down for a long period of time.
Hmm.
So when he comes back, if he's hot, I'd look to trade him. I really would, because my fear is if we get into game 100, game 110, Texas will be out of it. I can promise you that. And he re-aggravates this. They might shut him down for the rest of the season and just let the young guys and let Jackson Profile have his time. Let Isaiah kind of Falafea, the guy they called up that can play every position on the feet on the diamond. they might just let those guys have their shot and just see what happens. And I don't hate that. So I'm probably not gonna drop Odor at the moment because I think what he can give you is a big boost in a couple of categories. But what I'm going to do is look to sell high next time his value gets to a real peak. I'm not going to look at it and say, oh, Odor's hit 5 home runs in the last 2 weeks. Maybe this can be the year he hits 40 and drags his average back to that 270 mark.
Hmm.
Just sell high. Just ship him out for maybe a struggling second baseman, maybe an injured Johnathan Schoop, however you
Mm,
pronounce it.
Sure.
Maybe someone like that. Maybe someone who's
Uh,
just struggling a little bit.
I don't know. I guess this is a guy who's hit 30 home runs back to back. He has a 14 and 15 stolen bases back to back. Like you mentioned, the average was terrible last year, and he's hitting around 200. But this is a guy that hasn't stolen a base and hasn't hit a home run. So if he comes back, shows that he's healthy, and can approach those 30 and 15 again, I this is a guy that can definitely help you over the rest of the season. And if he can somehow get back to 240, 250 instead of 200, this is a guy that will hit probably 270 the rest of the way to get to there. So I'm a little more optimistic on Odor, but like you said, the last year was definitely something to worry about. And if the hamstring issue becomes something that lingers and he's missing time, and then all of a sudden we're in August and September and he's missing big chunks because they don't want to risk him, then it could get annoying. And then he could be a guy that hits maybe 15 home runs and 7 steals the rest of the way, and is, hurts your team. So I definitely see where you're coming from, but I'm gonna kind of shoot for his history and hope that I can get those 30 home runs and those double digit steals, and definitely help my team the rest of the way. As you mentioned, Johnathan Schoop, oblique strain, 10-day DL, not great. This is a guy I was really excited about coming into the year. Um, but hopefully it's a minor thing. They're definitely, especially early in the year, teams are a lot more inclined to throw guys on the DL, give them the 10 days off, and let them get back to work. So let them do their thing. Scoop should be back, and then we'll be good to go. Let's talk about David Price. He left the Yankees game after a quote sensation in his hand. He had 4 earned through the first inning. This is a guy that obviously has had elbow issue, has been good when he's healthy, but also dealt with injuries, dealt with problems. And this is a guy that's a 2-start candidate this week. Are you comfortable just throwing him into your lineup? Do you think he had DL stints in his near future? What are you doing with David Price?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I don't know if I would trust him to pitch both games this week. I mean, just with all the sort of postponements, and I think Boston might try and find a way of getting him out of it. I know Drew Pomeranz is going to come up at some point, possibly in the next week. He's going to come off the DL, so they might find a way of sliding him in such a way that they can alleviate the pressure on Price and give Price a bit of a longer rest in that rotation. Um, I was a little bit suspicious of Price going into this start because I wrote in one of the recaps I did that he well, anytime you're good against the Tampa Bay Rays, it's a bit like being good against the Texas Rangers. It counts for slightly less than you might think it does. And that's exactly the problem we had here, is that he'd previously pitched 14 innings and been really successful, but all against the Tampa Bay Rays. He came up against a decent hitting team in the Yankees and he really struggled. And maybe that was the numbness. Maybe the numbness came during the innings. I'm not 100% sure. It'd be interesting to see. But Price is going to be a guy that, for the foreseeable future, I'm going to find very comfortable starting against the Tampa Bay Rays, maybe even like the Baltimore Orioles of the world. But he's not going to be a guy I'm even that confident starting against the Angels because they've been really good this year. And what's to say that the numbness wasn't just something that came on during that innings? And I mean, if I was being hit all over the place by the New York Yankees, I'd start to feel a bit numb, honestly.
So is he a guy that if he comes back and looks good this week, you're looking to sell as a? I mean, because there's people talking about him as, oh, he's back, he's in that top 15, top 20 kind of conversation, and if he comes back, it looks like that guy again. Are you just saying, yeah, let me see what I can get, the best offer I can get, and get rid of him, while he's at his peak?
I think a good performance against the Angels might make me consider holding on to him a little bit longer. But a so-so performance against the Angels, followed up by I don't know how the schedule falls, but let's say a couple of cupcake starts, so to speak, that he takes advantage of,
Hmm.
then I would look to sell
So
high. But if he's impressed,
he's at the Angels, and then he's at Oakland. Two road starts. Two, we were talking about the A's a little bit before we pushed record, and the A's are one of those teams that you can rack up a ton of strikeouts if you look at Otani or some of the other guys that have faced the A's, and then you can also look at teams like that have gotten crushed by him, and Chris Davis and Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, and all of a sudden they're going off and they've hit 3 or 4 home runs off of you. So they're very up and down. But those are two I think that will give two matchups that will give us a good inclination of kind of where he's at.
yeah, if he struggles in the Los Angeles start and is successful in the Oakland start, then I've probably got concerns that what we're seeing is just a product of his opponent rather than a product of the way he's pitching. So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, I would probably look to sell high. But if he succeeds against the Angels and the A's, I might look to just hold on and see what I've got there. And then on the counter, if he struggles in both starts, I'm absolutely not selling because you won't be able to get value for him. It could still be this numbness that is the slight issue, and if they just think he can pitch through this, then you will start to see the uptick in performance as the year goes on.
Yep. Let's talk about Manuel Margot before we get onto the waiver wire. Got hit by a pitch. It's supposedly a deep bruise, 10-day DL. Is Margot a guy you're worried about? I know we both had optimism about him coming into the season, and he hasn't been great thus far. But once he comes back off the DL, are you comfortable kind of putting him back in your lineup?
Yeah, I try not to read too much into sort of 11 games and 50 plate appearances. Um, I think he'll be fine. I think we're still just looking at a guy that's going to hit 250, 260, going to steal 20-ish bases, perhaps get close to 30 if he comes back relatively soon, and could even sneak into the 15 to 20 home run bracket if everything kind of clicks when he comes back. So I'm definitely interested. I think him and Will Myers are absolute locks in that outfield. I think the third outfield spot is more of the question mark, but I'm going to have no hesitation sticking with Manuel Margot when he comes back. If these struggles extend into the next month, maybe then I start to get concerned. But initially, I'm gonna use him and live with the guy I drafted.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you, and I think speed is such a thing that if you can give you 25, 30 steals the rest of the way, you got to take advantage of that. Let's hit the waiver wire. Let's talk some names that can be added. And we've gone through so many injuries to middle infielders. I wanted to throw out a few options at kind of ownership level brackets, and we'll drop down. And so I'll just throw out Tim Anderson, who's 77% owned. Obviously, hot start, 267, 3 homers, 4 RBIs, those 6 steals. And as Drupal Cabrera hitting 347, 3 homers, and 5 RBIs. They're both around 70 to 80% owned. Is Tim Anderson the guy you trust the most, or is it kind of what you need if you need speed or if you need some average with a little bit of pop?
Yeah, I think it's what you need. I think Tim Anderson's definitely a guy to go chase for steals. I wouldn't say Asdrubal Cabrera's particularly that much more. I wouldn't feel safe with Asdrubal Cabrera being more powerful than Tim Anderson. I mean, Tim Anderson's got the talent to grow in
Mm-hmm.
that kind of role, and the White Sox are giving him the freedom to go out there and swing the bat. I think probably at the end of the year, it would shock me if Tim Anderson had a significantly better line in terms of average than Asdrubal.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of home runs, I could see it being a wash, and steals, I'd rather have Tim Anderson. So for me, that's actually quite an easy one. But I'm not a huge Asdrubal guy. I think if and when the Mets need to find somebody to take some time off, he might be the guy that ends up on the bench, and that concerns me a little bit. I honestly, if I was going to look at his dribble, I'd rather gamble on a couple of the shortstops or second baseman we're going to talk about now. Really,
Yeah. So as Drupal Cabrera, the one thing I will say is he tends to hit in the middle of that Mets lineup. That's actually kind of good with Conforto playing well, and Yoenis Cespedes and Jay Bruce. So He'll have a solid average. So if you need a little bump in your average, he'll give you a little bit of pop. He'll obviously have some great RBI opportunities. So I do like his dribble, but yeah, I'm with you. He's definitely a much safer option. There's not a ton of upside there. If we dig a little deeper, Dansby Swanson, this is a guy that nobody wanted coming into draft season. He's now up over 50% owned, hitting 340, a homer, a steal, 8 RBI. This is a guy that we all really loved 2 years ago, and everybody kind of got off of. And it seems like everyone's coming back around. Should they be?
Yeah, I think some of it was a bit of a prospect kind of thing that no one really everyone thought of him as this hyped prospect rather than as a what's the best way of describing it as what he could provide with the bat for fantasy. Everyone looked at the overall package, and the overall package
Yeah.
is absolutely great. Interesting to see today that he's sitting second in the lineup. I know
Hmm.
that NCART is not in the lineup. Culberson, Adams, and Bourgeois are all three of them are playing while Tucker, Flaherty, and NCART take a seat. So I don't think that will be something that we see regularly with uh, Swanson hitting second, but there's every possibility he could find himself moving up into that sort of 5, 6 kind of spot if Kurt Suzuki and those guys struggle. So Swanson's someone I'm definitely looking at. I, I don't think anyone should go crazy and expect he's suddenly going to be like a 30 home run guy. I think 20 home runs is still a ceiling. I think 20 steals is an absolute ceiling. Um, I don't think you should be expecting even that. So
Yeah.
it's nothing to go crazy about. He's definitely more of a guy in a points league where you value the guy who can get on base and get you singles and doubles. It, it's not an insult to say he's a Nick Markakis at middle infield with maybe a little bit more upside.
Yeah, I think a 315 average with close to 15 home runs and 15 steals feels pretty fair. Would you rather have Dansby Swanson or Cesar Hernandez, who's also shown some pop, shown some speed, and average around 300?
I think it's probably Cesar Hernandez just because I think I trust him a fraction more because I've seen him
Hmm.
do it. I think if I was gambling purely on upside, it would be Dansby Swanson. I think he's got the most room to grow. I think we know what Cesar Hernandez is, but I say that and then he seems to surprise me every year. But we've seen Cesar Hernandez do it, so right now he's the guy I'd pick up.
And Hernandez, I trust to hit earlier in the lineup on a more consistent basis.
Yeah.
Dansby's doing it now, but I'm going to need to see a lot more of that. As we dip down, we talk about those Oakland A's that we kind of talked about earlier. Jed Lowry, 310, 3 homers, 11 RBIs, and his teammate Marcus Semien, 250, a homer, 9 RBI. Do you have a preference of the two?
Again, if you're looking for upside, it's Simeon. If you're looking for average and a bit of safety, it's Jed Lowry. So it kind of depends where you are with your team right now. If you just need a solid fill in at second, and Jed Lowry may be available in third base in some leagues as well, just
Hmm.
because he plays a little bit there. Something I am just interested to look at is I'd be interested to know how Marcus Simeon is doing fielding wise because it feels to me that when he fields well he hits well, if that makes sense. Like I feel like the confidence all kind of grows in, and he has already had one error this year. But I remember by this time last year, he already had about 5 errors last year, and it all just seemed to be going desperately wrong for him. Um, I like Simeon. I like the kind of upside that he offers. In fact, this was the year I kind of was a little bit off the train, so that's probably a good indication that you should go and pick him up because he's going to be a beast.
Yeah. The other thing is with the A's is just their defense is kind of abysmal all around. I don't get it. I know Chapman and Olsen are supposed to be better, but I'm in the Northern California, so I get to watch them, and they always seem to have some issues with fielding mistakes and just simple stuff that doesn't look like it should be as big of an issue. I want to talk about Yuli Gurriel. He's on his way. He's on his way back. Obviously played Fridays, starting again Saturday. He's hitting fifth in the order, which is great to see him come back and right back into it. A guy that'll definitely give you average in this lineup, should be able to help you score some runs, score and drive in some runs. 30% owned. Is he a guy that people should be going to their waiver wire and adding now?
Yeah, again, it very much kind of depends on your situation. Gurriel's not going to be your big power breakout kind of guy. So if you're looking for power, I think I'd probably try and go looking elsewhere. But in terms of if you just want someone who's going to be a regular contributor and give you good average, I think Gurriel's a really good option. He's going to give you a ton of RBI opportunities. It's unlikely he'll give you a huge amount of runs opportunities because he's he's not going to hit very high in that lineup. He's always going to hit fifth or lower, I would
Mhm.
say. But that's going to offer a ton of opportunities. It's a great lineup, and I think he's a good ad. I really do. I would have had him ranked somewhere close to, let's say, Carlos Santana, Matt Carpenter kind of pairing. If he was healthy coming into the season, that's where I was starting to flirt with putting him before he got injured.
Yeah. No, I think I'm right there with you, and I definitely like Gurriel. Somebody I drafted in a lot of places, knowing that he would miss some time, and when he got back, I would be excited to be able to throw him back into my lineup, and I've done that. I did put out a pitcher piece on Fake Pigskin, as well as Ben put out his waiver wire for hitters. So make sure you're going to Fake Pigskin. Make sure you're checking all that out. And Ben does a great job. We obviously hit on a few names, but there's a ton more there. Of some of the pitchers, so I in my pitcher column, I got some ads, I got some streamers, and I got some guys to watch. For the guys that you should just be adding straight away, first guy Zach Wheeler. I think this is a guy that is not only is kind of beyond the streamer class, at least as of now, looks really good. Obviously, a lot more available than he probably should be. Um, has a two-start week this week. Is he a guy that you're willing to trust, or as you mentioned with Jacob Degrom, just the Damian Dabrowski never met strategy?
I mean, I like Wheeler and I'd pick him up. And honestly, I'm now hovering over dropping John Gray, who's had another abysmal outing, to pick up Zach Wheeler just because I feel like with Wheeler, I will always feel confident putting him in my lineup. Whereas
Yeah.
with Gray, I now don't even feel confident putting him in my lineup on the road. I mean, John Gray is one of those guys. But Wheeler, that was a really good outing. It was nice to see that a lot of people said the stuff was good. Um, there is talk that Jason Vargas is going to come back, but really, they're going to kick Zach Wheeler out of the rotation for Jason Vargas.
No
Like, I mean,
chance. No chance.
is that really what's going to happen? I think I would add Zach Wheeler now for the worst pitcher on your roster, and then if by some miracle they send him down for Jason Vargas, fine, he'll be back up when Matt Harvey implodes.
Yep. He does have a rough two-start week this week. He faces the Nationals at home, and then he's at Atlanta. Which Ben, I know you've done some looking into it. I also did, using ESPN's Park Factor and whatnot. SunTrust Park is just there. Are just so many runs being scored that it's scary for Don't just think, oh, it's the Braves. I'm not really scared of that lineup. That park is driving in a lot of runs, so don't feel like, oh, I can just throw him out there and everything will be fine. Um, if you're in a weekly league and you own Zach Wheeler, are you comfortable using him versus Washington and at Atlanta?
Um, no, I think I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I just said I feel confident starting him every time, but you're right. In Atlanta, it is a bad situation right now. Atlanta are very good at stacking left-handed hitters into their lineup. I think I counted that they can go with six plus the pitcher. So that park plays lovely for left-handed hitting. I think it's something stupid like a park factor of zero point 0.3 higher for left-handed home runs than it is for right-handed home runs. It's a massive boost, and I'm going to steer clear of pitchers there for the time being until I see some kind of normalization there. I'm going to steer clear, and if I'm steering clear of that start, then I don't see why I would. The national start is not going to be good enough to make it worthwhile.
Yep, and I think Wheeler's a perfect guy to add in stash, and if you can avoid him in the weekly leagues, I would definitely do that. Um,
Hmm.
and if you need him and you have to have those strikeouts, it's a gamble that I probably wouldn't take, but it's definitely one where he's worth adding and seeing how kind of it goes. Um, the next guy on my list is Lance Lynn. Obviously, not great in his first outing, but was incredible against a really good Astros team, and had 9 strikeouts, looked really good. The walks are a little concerning. He's had 10 walks over 2 outings, so that's not great. But Lance Lynn is a guy that's usually around 3 walks per 9. So I guess it's kind of be to be expected. Is Lance Lynn a guy that you think should be rostered in majority of leagues?
Yeah, I never know what to do with Lance Lynn. He's a kind of guy who I feel like is always undervalued, but then when you buy in, he never seems to make you feel good about your decision. He oh, sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Oh,
Woo!
there we go.
That's what happens when we do
Um,
it live, folks.
let's clear that one. Yeah, he. The trouble is, he's only got 9 innings so far and two starts, combined, and he has struck out 12. That is great, but was the Houston start thing going forward? I don't think he's a guy that should be owned in all leagues, but if you believe in his skill set, then by all means go and add him and just keep an eye on what's going to happen going forward. But I'm probably not going to be that aggressive that I'm going to go out and add him. I will add Zach Wheeler before I will add him.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so Lance Lynn is definitely a guy that if you're gonna have to deal with some walks, but I think there's a lot to like there. I think him, Alex Cobb, a lot of these Jake Arrieta, they all sign late. They all a little bit of a bump in the road to start the season, but I think Lance Lynn will build up that pitch count, and I think he'll be better as the season goes along. I think I would go Lance Lynn over Zach Wheeler, especially if you need somebody to pitch this week. But it is very close. The last guy on the list is a guy that we recommended last week as a streamer. I think he is a lot closer to being a guy that you can use on a more consistent basis, and that's Nick Pivetta versus Miami. 9 strikeouts, backed it up with 7 strikeouts against the Reds. Not walking a ton of guys. The Phillies are a lot better than they have been in past seasons, so chances at the win are definitely there. Um, where does Pavetta slide in for you, Ben? Is he still kind of in that streamers class where you're going to mix and match matchups, or is he a guy you if when you add him, even if you're not using him in every start, you want to hold on to him?
Um, so I'm just having a look, and he struggled a little bit against Atlanta. He was successful against Miami, and he was successful against Cincinnati. So for me, at the moment, he's still very matchup dependent, and I think based on the upside we have seen in the last two outings, where he struck out 16 guys in 12 and two-thirds innings, I would add him just to see if it is a matchup based thing. I think he has the potential for a lot of upside. Whether I'm trying to think about him in a comparison to Lance Lynn, and the trouble is I just never find Lance Lynn as a very upsidey
He's
kind of
not.
guy, and that's why I'm thinking I might be tempted to add Pavetta and then go and get somebody like a Lynn off the waiver wire. I feel like Lance Lynn will be on your waiver wire again this year.
Hmm.
This might be your last chance to get Nick Pavetta and Zach Wheeler, so I would go and add them first.
Yeah, and Pavetta, like the one thing about him is he will give you that strikeout upside. Lance Lynn is not going to be over a strikeout per inning. He'll probably be closer to 8 than he'll be than like 10.
Yeah.
And Pavetta and Wheeler both have a chance to be over a strikeout per inning, so that's very interesting. Pavetta is another guy that's at Atlanta this week, but then he gets a home game versus the Pirates. So if you're in a weekly league, you own Nick Pavetta. Are you comfortable using him?
Based on the fact that he gave up 3 earned runs in 4 innings last time out at Atlanta, I would sit him this week and just watch the result. And I would be more annoyed with myself if it goes wrong in Atlanta than I will be if it's a good out. If I play him in Atlanta and it goes wrong, than if I sit him and it's good. So therefore, based on that, I'm going to sit him this week.
Yeah, I guess it just depends. There is a lot of what else do you have, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't blame you if you used them. I think especially if you want those strikeouts and a chance at the win. I think Pavetta has a chance at both those. Now, mind you that like Ben said, the Atlanta start could go very poorly. It's at Atlanta again where he struggled very much, but that was also the first outing of the year. He's looked much better since then. His control's much better. So we'll see. But he's definitely a guy that I'm going to be watching this week to see how everything kind of pans out. There are a couple quick notes. The Red Sox have the Boston Marathon game on Monday, so the week will start at 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 Pacific. So if for you in weekly leagues, make sure your lineups are in Monday morning really early. Or if you're playing DFS or you have daily leagues, it is going to lock at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. Um, Ben, I wanted to throw out Nick Tropeano as a guy that I'm just kind of keeping an eye on. This is a guy I've liked in the past. Obviously, with the UCL injury, hasn't really pitched since 2016. Looked good against the Royals. 6.2 innings, 6 strikeouts. Um, another guy who has potential and upside. Uh, Obviously, still widely available. Is he interesting to you, or do you have to see it from a couple more starts before you even really consider him as like a streamer?
No, he's definitely an interesting guy for me. I mean, you just have to look at what he did in sort of shortened seasons in 2015 and 2016, where in 37 innings he had a 3.82 ERA and struck out 38, and in a 68 innings year he had a 3.56 ERA and struck out 68. He's another guy that I would find myself, and yeah. So the way I make a lot of my fantasy decisions, right or wrong, and this is often why my teams are boom or bust, is I look at it and say, what would I be more angry if I did? So would I be more angry if I added Lance Lynn and Lance Lynn and Nick Tropiano went on to be amazing? Or would I be more angry if I added Nick Tropiano and missed out on Lance Lynn?
Yeah.
I'd be more angry if I missed out on Tropiano, Wheeler, and Pivetta. So it's now those three. I think I would put Tropiano in. I'm going to say I would put him above Pivetta because we've seen more of it from him, but I think I would rather have Wheeler.
Yeah. So was Wheeler Tropiano Pavetta for you?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Lynn then at the back end, and it's not, and that's nothing on Lance Lynn's talent. It's just on upside, and as I say, the who would make me more angry if they succeeded.
And honestly, it depends on your rotation too. If you have a lot of guys that you know are going to be bulldogs that are
Oh
going to give
yeah,
you the innings that you're going to be fine with if you have to use them every week, I love the idea of grabbing Pavetta, of grabbing Wheeler, of grabbing Tropeano. If you have some guys that you're a little worried about, if they have a checkered injury past, if you're going to need innings, you have an innings minimum you have to meet. I do like Lance Lynn a little bit better. I think you'll still get some of those strikeouts, and you'll obviously the upside isn't quite as high, but it's still really solid and can give you a reliable option for a long part of the season.
yeah,
Um,
and by the same concept, depth of league comes into it. In a
yeah,
in a super deep league, if Lance Lynn came available on the waiver wire, I'd go and add him just for safety.
yeah,
Whereas in shallow leagues, I'm always going to look for the more upsidey guy, and Pavetta, Tropiano, that's the kind of guys that have that upside. So that's what it comes down to. You're right. You have got to look at your pitching staff and weigh it up. Have you got a load of Lance McCullers, Robbie Ray types? If you've got a load of those, maybe you want the inning safety of Lance Lynn, but again, his safety is not safety like Dallas Keuchel's safety, if that
mm.
makes sense.
I want to talk about Nick Senzel and Ronald Acuna. Obviously, two guys that have gotten a ton of hype, a ton of favor, a ton of this is the week, this is the week, this is the week. We thought they'd be called up Friday. They haven't been called up Friday. They haven't been called up Saturday. Senzel's playing third. Obviously, with the loss of Suarez, it'll be great for the Reds. Play him at third every day. Acuna is playing okay, not great. Preston Tucker, who was on fire to start the season, we both said probably not as a waiver claim last week, has since gone like 0 for 12 as of Friday. So that's definitely interesting. So I guess do should we just kind of pump the brakes on these two guys, or do you think there's still a good chance we see them come up for maybe this week or maybe heading into next weekend?
The thing is with Senzel is that he seems to have gone very quickly from being a rookie to being in consideration for the major leagues, and the fact that he's hitting 235 does concern me a little bit. I feel like Acuna, we've seen how good he can be, but I wonder if Senzel, with the way they've messed him around a little bit with his position, they might give him a bit longer. But he looks like he could come up at any moment, and with third base being open, I don't see why. But it also wouldn't shock me if we saw Senzel have another couple of months, just because he is so young at 23. I mean, I don't know. We were just talking about Dansby Swanson. How old is Swanson? Because that's a guy that we're now seeing the kind of fruits of being brought up and being allowed to mature in the majors. He's 24, so he struggled in his age 23 and 22 and 23 seasons in the major leagues. Well, he was okay in 22, but he only had a short time. So he struggled in his age 23 season, and then he's been really good at age 24. So maybe that's what we see Cincinnati do, and they're now going to go with that school of let Senzel learn on the job. I mean, the difference there is that Atlanta were probably closer when they let Swanson learn on the job than Cincinnati are with Senzel, but I see no reason why they won't bring him up. I've already added him in a couple of leagues. I've missed out on all the Acuna because you couldn't get him anywhere. But Acuna might come up after Senzel. There's every possibility because Preston Tucker, after you put the kibosh on this yesterday, Kyle. So all the Ronald Acuna fans, please send your hate mail to our notorious KRO on Twitter. He pointed out that Preston Tucker was 0 for 12 in surprisingly his previous 12 at bats, because that's kind of what 0 for 12 goes for. But and then didn't Tucker hit a home run last night, Kyle? Just put the brakes on there, Ronald
Put
Acuna.
a little shot in the old arm there of Preston Tucker. I knew he needed a little bit of a nudge, so I just started talking crap about him, and all of a sudden he was fine.
If Preston Tucker's reading our private chat on Twitter,
Oh,
I'm
no,
very
I
impressed.
got no. I send him DMs. He knows my
Okay.
feelings. Yeah. Yeah. No. I don't know. I think Dansby Swanson is a good idea. Of Senzel, Acuna. They're both really exciting. They could both come up and struggle for a year, and then next year we're talking about no one really being interested, and all of a sudden they're good. So I think Acuna is going to be a thing, and obviously I own him in our keeper league, so I'm really happy about that. I drafted Senzel in a couple places, so I am hoping he comes up. I'm hoping he's productive. Okay, let me ask you this: Kingery is already up and plays like he does. Would you rather have Nick Senzel or Scott Kingery the rest of the season?
Scott Kingery,
Yeah, I think I'm
but
with you.
it's very close.
Okay, let's finish up like we always do with a little streaming and dreaming, then we'll have a little two-start options for you guys, and including one name that we may be avoiding. We obviously threw out some other names that we're talking about in terms of adding and all that good stuff, so we did give you a little more there. Um, Trevor Williams, 21% owned on Yahoo, is pitching at home versus the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies have actually been a pretty strikeout prone team, and PNC is a really good park for pitchers. Not a lot of runs being scored there. Trevor Williams, a guy I like. He's widely available, owned in only 21% of Yahoo leagues. So if you can add Williams, I would definitely recommend that. And I believe he's actually a two-start option this week with a game at Philly. So in weekly leagues, maybe avoid, but that Philly matchup, I mean, it could go poorly if Kingery and what's it, Ryan Reese Hoskins go crazy. It could be bad, but he's a guy I like, and definitely think he makes sense. Another guy that I like a lot is Andrew Triggs. He's going to be pitching the day game versus the White Sox. Has a lot of strikeout potential, 17 strikeouts and 6 walks through 3 outings. Looked good again last night. I think both these guys are interesting options and available. Ben, are you comfortable using either or both of these guys?
It always concerns me a little bit when you talk about Trevor Williams and you talk about the Rockies, because the Rockies are one of those teams that you're right. You feel like they can either strike out 20 times in a game or they could hit 20 home runs. They're just that kind of boom or bust kind of offense. I think I would actually be more likely to start Andrew Triggs because I think the White Sox lineup is more susceptible. Um, but the trouble with Triggs is we discussed that he's got that kind of, and Damien always says it got that kind of funny arm slot, kind of funny delivery speed that eventually teams catch up to. But I don't think the White Sox are going to be the teams that catch up to it. I think Triggs will have success this year against a lot of opponents not in his division who he's facing for the first time each year, because I think it is weird when you face someone who's a bit different. And I think the White Sox, young team, a lot of inexperience there, will make mistakes. I'm presuming that is at home for Triggs
It is,
because
yes.
obviously there's a lot of rain offs and snow offs going on up in the north of America at the moment, so that's always something to consider. But with Triggs being at home, I think I would give him the first shot at the two.
Yep. Two start options. Ian Kennedy at Toronto, at Detroit. I know his last matchup was not great. But at Toronto, at Detroit, we talked about the Blue Jays. They're not exactly not scary, but They can strike out. They can struggle a little bit, and then the Detroit matchup is interesting. Are you comfortable using Ian Kennedy in a weekly league?
Yeah, I think I am. I think Toronto are susceptible, and even though he doesn't throw a slider, which is a useful pitch against Toronto, they are notorious for struggling against the slider. He is a guy that I would consider with these two starts. I think the at Detroit should be really good, and I think at Toronto is definitely survivable with Josh Donaldson on the DL.
Aaron Sanchez. This is a guy. He's got versus Kansas City, which you like, but then he's at Yankees, which you do not like. And his last outing against the Yankees, which was in Toronto, 4 earned, 2 strikeouts, not great. But as things have kind of gone along, he's gotten better. He had 4 earned, then he had 3 earned, now he had 1 earned. 2 strikeouts, 7 strikeouts, 4 strikeouts. So not super consistent with the strikeouts. The walks have been there, 11 on the season. So that's not great. Is Aaron Sanchez a guy that you're still kind of excited about, and would you be willing to use him for a two-start this week?
Not a chance.
Not a
He
chance.
has no strikeout upside. The Royals don't really strike out. They won't do any damage, but they don't really strike out in general. The Yankees could strike out a ton, but they could also put him. They could also hit him into the Mets ballpark. They could hit him that far. So I don't think I'd be touching him this week.
Yeah. John Lester is actually a guy I think we can agree that if you have, hopefully you have better options. Um, we talked about some different guys that are going to be having two-start weeks. He's got the Cardinals at home, and then he's at Colorado. I feel like that could be a really really bad week for John Lester.
I feel like it could. I feel like the St. Louis start could be quite good just because um, it's not a bad. They're not a bad team to pitch against, but it could also be dangerous. If you're going to pitch in Colorado, now's the kind of time to do it because it's colder. The ball doesn't travel quite as well. But I'm just going to stay clear of at Colorado. I mean, John Lester is no Sean Newcomb, so I don't see him having Sean Newcomb's level of success in Coors Field. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah.
Um, in all seriousness, just no, I can't start John Lester this week. I can't trust him. He's been too up and down already this year, and it may be that after he performed well against Milwaukee, he performs well against these two lineups, but it's just not worth the risk this week if you've got better options.
All right, one last one before we get out of here. Are you using Lance McCullers or Dallas Keuchel this week, or are you using both of them? They got a road starts, but at Seattle and at the White Sox.
You know, I would use Dallas Keuchel, I think, because I think he will do well against the White Sox. I think his type, he might actually get some strikeouts against them, which is always a bonus. And I don't think there'll be any damage done to him. Lance McCullers, both those teams can strike out, and if they can strike out against the average pitcher, they can damn well strike out against Lance McCullers.
Hmm.
So I think. Even despite Lance McCullers' bad outing, I would give him another shot, especially in those two road starts against strikeout-prone teams.
Who do you think walks more batters in their two outings, Lance McCullers or Dallas Keuchel?
Probably Lance McCullers.
I think I go Keuchel, but it will be interesting. We'll have to reevaluate when we come back here next week. All right, Ben, this was a
Mm.
lot of fun. Like we mentioned on Fake Pigskin, we have our waiver wire. We have streamers, dreamers, and pitchers to keep an eye on. Obviously, we'll have DFS content all week. We'll have our wraps, so make sure you're reading that. A lot of good nuggets in there from Ben and I. At 60FT Podcast on Twitter. Give us a follow. Send us your questions if you have ad drop questions, if you have trade questions, if you have any of that streaming option type guys that you're considering, all that good stuff. But for Ben Rolfe, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.